Why did the marketer get off the trampoline? He was worried about his bounce rate. Anyway, terrible jokes aside, I'm Sam, and here today to explain everything about bounce rate, why it's important, how to lower it, and how context is king. So why not stick around for this week's Giant Wednesdays? Wednesday. Just one day. Intro video. So let's kick this off with the first question. What is bounce rate? Well, according to Google, a bounce is a single page session to your site. This bounce is calculated specifically as a session that triggers only a single request to the analytics server that your site sits on. For example, someone opens up your latest blog on your site, gives it a read, and then pops off or bounces off. The bounce rate is calculated by the total number of single page sessions divided by all sessions. Bit of math for you there. So with that explained, I want to share 5 things with you about your bounce rate. Number 1, where to find bounce rate. So in Google Analytics, you can find your bounce rate by going to Audience Overview and then clicking the metric bounce rate. Easy enough, right? This will give you a view of your overall bounce rate for your whole website. If you want to look at the percentage for specific pages, you'd instead head over to the All Pages report and filter by the individual pages. That will give you the page breakdown. You can also look at your bounce rate by location, by source, by landing page, and a whole host of other factors. This brings me into my next point. Without considering the context, bounce rate is just a number. It's not an insight. So point number 2, context is vital. Bounce rates could vary by country and area. For example, if your company only serves in the UK, views from Germany may bounce when they realize you don't operate in their area. In this case, your bounce rate could look high, but the reason is very clear. We can also expect that new visitors are likely to have a higher bounce rate as they might just be in the research phase or visiting the site for a particular reason, like a blog. Returning visitors, on the other hand, are usually there because they're interested in your content or your offering and therefore likely to have a lower bounce rate. A high bounce rate does not always indicate a problem. In some cases, it simply shows that you've actually done the job. You've answered the user's query and they got what they wanted and carried on with their day. They might now at least be aware of your brand and get into that pile of returning users, come back to you again. If you've got remarketing set up, then you can even encourage that kind of action. To flip it and reverse it though, a shockingly low bounce rate is not necessarily a cause for celebration. If your bounce rate is below 20%, it's likely that your analytics is broken. It would be unwise to assume that a bounce rate above 50%, for example, is a complete catastrophe. In fact, between 41 and 55% is typically the average. However, it does mean that the visitor hasn't taken any further action, which is obviously not ideal. They haven't gone on to another page or completed a transaction. So what could be the reason why people aren't sticking around? Well, this leads on nicely to point number 3. What can influence bounce rate? The honest answer is there's a whole host of reasons, but some of those reasons could be your web page has a slow load time. There's no call to action to keep them going through. It could be poor formatting or having misleading titles. Perhaps your website isn't optimized for mobile. Could be a broken or dead 404 page, or the forms are broken. So in essence, if something is wrong with your website, either it's broken or elements are missing, it's unlikely to play in your favor. Number 4, why is bounce rate so important? Well, in terms of rankings, you should know that your bounce rate is not actually a ranking factor on Google. That means that when they crawl your site, they aren't finding your high bounce rate and moving you straight to page 30. But, and this is a big but, I shouldn't gesture. This is a big but. We know that Google does use some engagement signals for SEO. We just don't know what they are. They're quite elusive there. What we do know, as we've discovered, is what our bounce rate is. And we can use this information with context. Remember, context is king. One of the signals that can indicate levels of engagement is bounce rate. So it's a useful thing to know. The goal shouldn't really be to lower your bounce rate. It should instead be to make sure your visitors are satisfied with your offering, that you answer their query, that it's relevant to what they've searched for, and that the page is optimized for good user experience. Take a look at your higher bounce rate pages and make some observations. Optimizing for these things will in turn influence your bounce rate and lower it. Finally, point number 5, how can I lower my bounce rate? Other than the methods that I've already mentioned, there are a few other ways to try and lower your bounce rate. As we talked about, answering the visitor's query is great, but bouncing is not so great, unless you're Tigger. who, due to copyright reasons, we can't. Can we get an animation? No, okay. If you want to get them to stick around, you might like to try offering a short snippet of info on the page that does give them a quick answer, but then look here, you have a fantastic in-depth guide to the exact thing they were looking for. If, for example, your site had a regular blog, news, or content update, you could integrate a similar articles widget that makes them want to click over to some of your other awesome content, and therefore lower bounce rate. You can even just make a conscious effort to add valuable, relevant links throughout your content to take users off on an adventure of relevancy and delight relating to their query. Finally, make sure that your call to actions count. Remove the buy now, add to cart, generic messages, and put some personality into it. Let the user know what they're getting and make it their decision to click. So when you take context into account and prioritize user engagement and satisfaction over just numbers, you'll start to see your bounce rates lowering instead. If you have any questions, make sure to pop them in the comments below, but otherwise, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel for fantastic digital themed videos every single week. This has been Giant Wednesday. I've been Sam. Thank you for watching.